take and give it unto them for me and thee. That was there in Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 17, verse 27.
All right. Thank you, Bruce.
Yeah.
Anybody else? All right. We'll go ahead and get into our lesson then. The title of it this morning is The Power of Jesus. And we're going to be in the 8th chapter of Matthew. Now, when the people that put these lessons together, they actually include about the whole chapter, but we're only studying the first 18 verses. That's ones we're going to be talking about. Anyway, it's on page 36 in your booklet if you don't have that or do have that. When I was studying this lesson, I thought of a few common cliches that I've heard for many years. I use a lot of cliches up here. I discovered when I was writing that down. I need to change my style a little bit. Some of the things I thought of when I was reading this, put your money where your mouth is. Anybody ever hear that one? Somebody being all talk and no show. You ever hear that one? And then a little cruder, I'm sorry, don't let your mouth write checks that your hind end can't cash. You ever hear that one? These are all similar cliches, right? And I'm sure that there's other ones, but they all kind of describe or talk about the same thing. Anybody see the common theme through all of those three? Somebody talks a big game, but there's no action or no talk to back it up, right? That's kind of what that means. Anybody know people like that? Turn on the TV, you can see people like that on about any channel, right? It seems like that could truly describe a whole lot of people these days. Everybody from the schoolyard bully to the leaders of our country, right? Think about it. Everybody's got these words, they got the big words, they got the big game, but they don't have anything to back it up. There's no action, no follow-up. Talking is what they do best, and they like to practice, don't they? Everybody likes to get on and talk and talk and talk. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I promise this, I promise that. We hear this and we hear this and we hear this. Most of the time, I believe the speaker, whoever is saying this, things that they never back up or can't back up, they believe it, don't they? I'm sure, I'd like to think, I kind of think, politicians, when they make promises, they'd sort of like to keep those promises, wouldn't you like to think? They're not doing it just simply to get elected or whatever the case is. Maybe they think they can accomplish these things. But we get promised a lot of things, don't we? And we don't necessarily see these things coming. The threats, the promises, the bragging. But in the end, talk is actually what they have. And that's it. That's all they've got. It's just the talk. So because of this, their fame, their popularity, their credibility all goes out the window. If you hear somebody talking and talking and talking, I'm going to do this, I promise this, or whatever the case is, whether it's a threat or a promise or whatever, and consistently you never see that come to pass, how long are you going to keep listening to that person? Probably not very long. I mean, if you never see this, if you never see any of what they're talking about come to fruition, pretty soon the audience is going to find something else to listen to, right? You're going to go somewhere else. You're going to, whatever the case is, because there's no proof. People are only going to listen so long if there's no proof to back up the claims that the mouthpiece is always saying all the time. And what's amazing to me is how many people that we see every day that have truly risen to fame simply because of the words that they speak. And there's nothing else there. It's all empty. It's just the words. But people listen, they get famous. I always used to think about people like the Kardashian family, and who was it, the Paris Hilton that was so famous. Anybody know what they were famous for? Yeah, I mean, they didn't do anything. These people, they weren't actors, they weren't singers, they weren't performers. They just got famous because they talked, and they wanted to get out there where people could see them and whatnot.
They were probably wealthy.
Oh, that helps. It helps them get on the front page there a little bit. You know, politicians tell us all the time what they're going to do when they get elected. They either can't do it, they can't deliver, or they won't deliver on their promises. You know, I thought about even employers. You know, you sit down in an interview, somebody that's really trying to hire somebody. You know, an employer, the interviewer, the person who's doing the hiring, HR, whatever you have in your company, they paint a beautiful picture of what it looks like to work at that company, do they not? Oh man, you're going to do this, you're going to make this money, here's your benefits, it's a great environment. Does it always work out that way once you get the job? No, things aren't necessarily as rosy a picture as what they painted. You know, even the schoolyard bully never quite shows he's as tough as he says he is, does he? Talks about it a lot, but that's as far as it goes. You know, we spent the last few lessons studying about sections of what we refer to as the Sermon on the Mount. And if you go back and you look in your Bible and flip there, you know, we're in chapter 8 now, but if you go back and look at, 7, 6, 5, and back there, you see all kinds of red letters. What's the red letters mean in our Bibles? It's Jesus. Jesus was doing a lot of talking, wasn't he? And he had a lot of attention, didn't he? But what if that's all it was? What if it was only talk? Jesus. What if Jesus made all these claims, gave all these instructions, and then just moved on? Okay, so think about the Sermon on the Mount and the lessons that we've had over the last several weeks. Do you think that the sermon would have been as effective as it was if that's all it was just a sermon? It would be something that we remembered and studied and it would have been written about? You know, it's who's to say, really. Maybe, but maybe not either. But Jesus wasn't just some guy making claims, was he? You know, sometimes it's hard sometimes for us to keep in mind Jesus was fully man, fully God. And as fully God, Jesus is capable of doing anything, right? Anything. In this lesson today that we're going to pick up now, and again, this is immediately after the Sermon on the Mount, we're going to see that Jesus does indeed add action to his words, right? And we're going to see at the end, and we'll talk about this, however much we get through this. I hope all of it, we probably will. And we'll see why that's so important for Jesus to show actions to back up the words that he speaks. Jesus just didn't go around talking to people, and 2,000 years later, here we are studying the words of Jesus. There's a whole lot more to it than Jesus ministry than just what came out of his mouth, right? So we know that we weren't just getting lip service. All right, so let's read through this. We'll do like we always do. There's a bunch of verses this morning. I'll read the first verse. You guys read after me, and this starts in Matthew chapter 8, verse 1. It says, "When he was come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him.
And behold, there came a leper and worshipped him, saying, Lord, thou wilt make me clean.
And Jesus put forth his hand and touched him, saying, I will, be thou clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed.
And Jesus said unto him, See that thou tell me that thou mayest. Shall they establish the priest and offer the gift of the man before testimony to them?
And when Jesus was entered into Capernaum, there came unto him a centurion, beseeching him.
Saying, Lord, my servant, I am homesick of the 3 weeks or more.
And Jesus saith unto him, I will come and heal him.
The centurion answered and said, Lord, I will not worry that thou shalt come under my will of my foot. Speak the word only, and my servant shall be healed.
For I am a man under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to this man, Go, and he goeth. And to another, Come, and he cometh. And to my servant, Do this, and he doeth it.
When Jesus heard it, he marveled, and said unto them that followed, Verily I say unto you, have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel.
And I say unto you, that many shall come from the east and west, and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven.
But the children of the kingdom shall be cast out
And Jesus said unto the centurion, Go thy way, and as thou hast believed, so be it done unto thee. And his servant was healed in the selfsame hour.
And when Jesus was going into the Peter's house, he saw his wife lame, with a fever.
And he touched her hand, and the fever left her. And she arose and ministered unto them.
When the evening was come, they brought him to him, that they would set the devils, and he cast out the spirit, the Lord's word, and healed all the sick.
That it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by Esaias the prophet, saying, Himself took our infirmities and bare our sicknesses.
Now when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave commandment to depart to the other side.
Amen. All right, whole lot of stuff going on here. So immediately, again, we're right on the heels of the Sermon on the Mount. So Jesus finished the sermon, the preaching, and he comes down from the mountain. And it says that he is followed by, and I'm taking this from the first two verses, followed by a multitude of people. So Jesus has gained, with his words, has gained some popularity. He has piqued some interest. People, I heard what he had to say. I want some more of that. I want to hear some more of this, which is great. And he's coming down. And so now all eyes are on Jesus, right? Everything he does, people are going to be watching. He has said a whole lot of stuff about the kingdom of God, what it takes, and just all of these different things. And I'm not going to go back and reteach the Sermon on the Mount because that was a whole bunch of stuff. But there's a lot of interest in what Jesus has said and taught these people about, just about being a Christian, we'll say. Even though that phrase is not a phrase yet, it's how to live a godly life, that kind of stuff. And he encounters, right off the bat, he encounters a leper. So they're following him. He comes to a leper, and most people in those days, seeing a leper, you give them a wide berth, right? You don't want to get close to this person. Leprosy is a horrible disease. It basically eats the body, flesh, terrible stuff, highly contagious. And according to Mosaic law, if you were a leper, you're unclean. You are not to have contact with anybody. Nobody's to contact you. You're isolated. And, the disease got so bad at one point, there were leper colonies established where that's where it's like prison for being sick. You were put away, usually on an island or a very remote community, and you guys can all be sick together because you're all going to die anyway. We can't cure this. We're done. You're just off. Jesus didn't shun people like that, though, did he? The leper comes to Jesus, and look what the leper does in verse 2. So there came a leper and worshipped him right off the bat. It says he worshipped him. This leper knows something about Jesus, that Jesus is to be praised right off the bat. And I think it's important what he says here. He says, Lord, if thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. All right? That statement is so full of faith, it's unbelievable to me. And I don't know if you see this the same way or not, but he said, if you, basically, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, Jesus, if you will, you can make me clean. Notice what he did not say. Jesus, can you heal me? This man knew. He knew that Jesus could heal him if it was his will. Isn't that the way we're supposed to pray anyway? I mean, think about it. When we pray, when we ask God for something, when we go to him, whether it's for ourselves, whether it's, an intercession prayer for someone else, I don't want to say, Jesus, can you? Because when you say, can you heal me? That's like, are you capable? Well, what is God capable of? Everything. And this leper knew that. And his words showed that kind of faith. He knew this man, Jesus, could cure him if it's your will. And isn't that also part of what we should pray? We don't get to tell God, God, you have to cure me. God, cure me now. God, I need money right now. God, I need you to do this right now. It's not a genie in a lamp, right? We don't get to make our demands of God. That's not the way it works. God's going to do things according to his will. And this man, I believe, also recognized that. Jesus, if it is your will, I know you can make me whole. Right? So he's exhibiting a great bit of faith in that kind of approach to Jesus. When we go to pray to Jesus, we should also have that same kind of, I know that you can, but if it's your will, I'd like you to do this. I mean, that's kind of the way we should approach it, right? And you know what? Sometimes it's not his will. Sometimes it's not his will that we be physically healed, physically cured, or whatever the case is, or something. He knows what we need. He's got a plan. His plan's better than our plan. I mean, we wouldn't still be here if his plan wasn't working, right? So, at any rate, this leper comes to Jesus, total faith. I know that you can heal me. Will you? That's kind of what he's saying here, paraphrasing. So, in the next couple of verses, in 3 and 4, and I'll read these, and it says, and Jesus put forth his hand and touched him, saying, I will, be thou clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said unto him, see, thou tell no man, but go thy way, show thyself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded for a testimony unto them. So Jesus physically touched him, okay, put his hand on him and said, I will. It is my will that you be healed. And he did immediately. Jesus spoke him clean. So Jesus both demonstrated through a physical touch and his word, and got to remember, it's not just the two of them standing there talking. There's a multitude. Now, I don't know how much, the writer here constitutes a multitude. Let's just say it's more than 10. There's a crowd of people following Jesus. And so all of these people are seeing what's going on. They're hearing what's going on. You think there's much of an impact now that Jesus reached out and touched this man that no one's supposed to touch, and immediately his leprosy is gone? Talk about, now when you look back at those cliches that I gave at the beginning here, being able to back up with action what your words just said. I mean, I can't think of a better way to do it than to perform. And this is obviously a miracle, and this chapter is all about Jesus performing miracles. I think the writer of the commentary here said there's a total of about 5 or 6 miracles that Jesus performs on. I think there's more than that if you read all the details here. So Jesus touches him, speaks it, and says, it is my will, be healed. And he was healed. So then the leper, because remember, Jesus told everybody when he came, he did not come to put away the law, did he? He came to fulfill the law. Jesus was fulfillment of the law in the flesh, right? But Jesus was also a Jew, right? And that's the way that he grew up in the Jewish customs. He grew up, learning about Jewish tradition, the Mosaic law, and all this stuff. And part of what you did here, once you were cleansed like this from anything, whether it was this illness or not, you went and you made an offering at the church, did you not? At the temple. And Jesus, in compliance with Mosaic law, told him, now don't tell anybody what I did, but you need to go to the temple to see the priest and make your offering, just as Moses instructed us to. So Jesus is, again, so I think part of that is Jesus knew that he was going to come under some close scrutiny from the powers that be, but this was totally in compliance with what Jewish law dictated that the man would do here. You're cleansed, now you can make your offering. That's the way it worked. And so that's what he told him to do. All right, so that's the first miracle that we look at in this lesson that we have this morning. The next one comes up immediately after this. So I'm going to read verses 5, 6, and 7 together. And it says, and when Jesus was entered into Capernaum, there came unto him a centurion, beseeching him, and saying, Lord, my servant lieth at home sick of the palsy, grievously tormented. And Jesus said unto him, I will come and heal him. So Jesus' next person that he encounters when he comes into Capernaum is an officer. He is with the army. He's got men under him. He's a centurion. I think that means that they had command of 100 men that were underneath him, is what the centurions were. So here's a man who is in a place of power in the army, the Roman army, that he's not a Jew, as far as we know, but he comes to Jesus, and he's not coming for himself because he's personally ill. He's coming on behalf of someone else. This is an intercessionary kind of request to Jesus, right? And he comes to Jesus, again, in faith, knowing that he could, and he asks help for his servant, not for himself. He's not even asking for himself. Look, my servant has palsy, and he's in terrible torment. Would you heal him? That's basically what he asked him. Jesus says, you know what? I'm going to come and heal him. I'll come, and I'm going to heal this guy. In verse 8, and I'm going to read several verses here together, probably up to 12. He says, I'm trying to watch the time. I've got plenty of time. He says, the centurion answered and said, Lord, I am not worthy that thou shouldest come under my roof, but speak the word only, and my servant shall be healed. For I am a man under authority, having soldiers under me, and I say to this man, go, and he goeth, and to another, come, and he cometh, and to my servant, do this, and he doeth it. When Jesus heard it, he marveled and said to them, let's just stop there a minute. After Jesus told him that he would come and heal this guy, not only did he approach Jesus with faith, obviously, because he recognized that Jesus could heal his servant, a man that's beneath him. But he comes to Jesus with some humility too, doesn't he? I mean, there's so much stuff in this that we could really just tear apart and look at. How important is it for us to come to Jesus in humility? It's crucial, is it not? Again, it's almost like going back and making my demands of God. God, I know you can do this, so do it. Jesus, I know you can do this. I need you to do it right now. Is that kind of attitude going to see many answered prayers? No. We have to come to him in faith, believing, and in humility. This man approached Jesus. Look, I'm an important guy. I've got people that answer to me. I've got soldiers under me. I tell them to go, they go. I tell them to come here, they come here. I have servants. I say do this, and they do it. But I'm not worthy for you to come into my house. That's humility, is it not? That's saying, you know what, Lord, I love what you do for me. I'm not worthy of any of this. I don't deserve any of this. I don't deserve for you to come in and do this for me. But I'm asking you to. That to me is what we've seen with both of these people that approach Jesus, is just perfect humility, that they come in faith and knew he could do it. Will you do it? No demands, no expectations. They want Jesus to do this for whatever the thing is. So he tells Jesus, you know, I'm not worthy for you to even come into my home. Jesus' response to this approach and the way this man came to him, he was impressed. You read that in verse 10, it says, and when Jesus heard it, he marveled and said to them that followed, verily I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. Now, this is a Roman soldier, and he has exhibited more faith than anybody else that Jesus has encountered so far. And he points that out to them. So he wants to make sure that the people that are following him didn't just listen to the words that he said on the mountain, you know, when he was giving this sermon, but these little interactions as well. Very important. These little interactions, this one-on-one stuff that he, you know, he's talking to this guy. So then Jesus goes on and he says in 11 and 12, he says, and I say unto you that many shall come from the east and west and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast out into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, in verse 13, he says, And Jesus said unto the centurion, Go thy way, and as thou hast believed, so it be done unto thee. And his servant was healed in the self same hour. So, because of this man's faith, Jesus healed the servant. That's why he did it. This man put his faith in him that he could do it, believing that he could do it. That was all it took for Jesus, I will. And he healed the servant at the same time. Now, notice also that in healing the servant, Jesus has demonstrated something else. So in the first miracle, Jesus touched and spoke, right? And healed the leper. This time, the servant's not there. We don't know where the servant is. Jesus simply said, Jesus was going to go to the guy's house. The guy said, nope, it's not necessary. I'm not worthy for you to come into my house. Just simply speak it. And you know what? Because he believed that Jesus could, that's exactly what Jesus did. He spoke it, and the man was healed in that same hour. In this case, it was not, Jesus proved it was not necessary for him to physically touch. You know, everybody talks about, I need a touch from the Lord, I need a touch from the Lord. Just Jesus, I think Jesus' thoughts, Jesus, his word, his whatever, all of that is a touch from Jesus. He doesn't have to put his hand, and he certainly didn't hear. He simply spoke it, and it only took his words and his will to do it, and the servant was immediately healed. Okay, so this is the second miracle that we see as we look at this.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
You absolutely, you talked about earlier, you talked about how actions, you're backing up what you say. You touched on it, but here's a Roman pagan. He's seen something, prior to this. He absolutely, because he came to faith, he came to humility. So absolutely, there was something he had witnessed,
Yeah.
to bring him to that point. And also, I think about the centurion's heart, too, in regards to that servant. He could have just fired him. And
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He had he was thinking of that other person. I think Jesus probably appreciated that, too.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a small child growing up, I was told, actions speak louder than words, and I just sitting here thinking of, I was thinking, if your actions backed up your words, you really got some hair there in your words and actions.
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly the case of what we're seeing here. All right, so let's look at the next couple of verses 14 and 15. We'll learn all kinds of stuff here, too, that I never really even thought about. And when Jesus was coming to Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother laid and sick of a fever. And he touched her, and the fever left her, and she arose and ministered unto them. Now, how many people in here knew Peter had a wife? I never thought about it. I probably read this over the last 20-some years a bunch of times. I never thought about Peter having a wife, but here we're told Peter has a wife. No wonder he was such a hothead when he was out there. He's got his wife and his mother. He's got his wife and his mother-in-law here in the same house. Come on. No, I'm joking.
Fished all the time.
And fished all the time. He wanted to fish. So anyway, he comes in verse 14. He comes into Peter's house, and his mother was ill. His wife's mother was ill. I'm sorry, not Peter's mother-in-law. But notice here that Jesus didn't even speak. Now he comes in, and she's there, ill with a fever. Jesus never said a word. He simply put his hand on her. Never said a thing. Okay? Not that we're told, so I'm assuming that we have an account of what happened here. He didn't even speak. He simply touched her hand, and she was well. Would you call that another miracle? She must have really been healed. And talk about immediately. Anybody in here like to get a fever? As grown-ups, fevers don't do well. A little kid gets a fever, 101, 102, 103. You can tell they feel bad, but they're still pinging off the walls. When man gets sick, amen. 99 is tough, right? You get up above that and you're wiped out. You're into bed for weeks. fevers in adults don't go well. It just affects us differently. So, but here's mother laying in bed. She has a fever. Jesus simply touched her and she's healed immediately. She felt so good, she gets up and starts taking care of her company. I mean, that's a healing, if you ask me. There's no rest period. There's no recuperation. She doesn't have to go to a step-down unit or anything like this. She's healed, and she's up ministering, taking care of her company.
Most adults know when your temperature is above 100, we know what it can do to our bodies.
Oh, yeah.
That's why we try to stay covered up in the morning
Oh, yeah.
and get it down.
So she's healed. So that's the third miracle. So Jesus, the first time he did it by touch and speaking. This time, the second miracle he performed simply by speaking. And now he did it simply with a touch of his hand. All right. So 3 different variations of Jesus performing a miracle, healing somebody, doing something for somebody. And we see that again. This is all, you got to keep this all in context. This is right on the heels of the Sermon on the Mount. They heard all of his words. Now they're seeing Jesus in action. That's why the title of this, The Power of Jesus. This is why it's so important for us to recognize Jesus wasn't just this great speaker. You know, you have these scholars today, oh, Jesus was a great man. He was a very intelligent speaker. He was a great teacher. That's not just what Jesus was, though, was it? Jesus was God in the flesh, capable of doing anything, right? All right, so in verses 16 and 17, it goes on, and now things are like going out of control. I mean, when you think about it. He says, when the even was come, they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils, and he cast out the spirits with his word, and healed all that were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, himself took our infirmities and bare our sicknesses. Why is that important, that showing that prophecy fulfilled? Why is that important right now? Why is it important that we would know that? Remember, Jesus is trying to make people understand he is the Messiah that was promised. He is he that was prophesied. And he's doing exactly what it was prophesied that he would do. He took their infirmities. He healed the sick. He took care of them. But anyways, it just goes on and on from that point. So Jesus is healing the sick. He's casting out devils. He just simply using his word, showing proof after proof after proof after proof that he was indeed the prophesied Messiah. It wasn't just words that he came and said, you know what, I've studied all this stuff. Because you think about this, and because we see it all the time. We see false prophets. We see false teachers. Let's just say false preachers. You see it. Turn on television and listen, or radio. What the scriptures say. I've been studying. Watch this. You know, I'm the answer to the prophecy that said I would come being born in the manger in Bethlehem and born a virgin birth. And listen to the story. This is what happened between mom and dad. And he could have, you know, I'm going around, oh, watch me cast out these devils. But Jesus was doing these things, right? This is one of those, the proof, another cliche, the proof is in the pudding, right? I mean, he's doing what he said he could do. There's no way to dispute this. There is no way you could look at what Jesus was doing and not recognize what that man just preached to us for 5 chapters in the book. I didn't look at it like that. He is that guy. This is he that is doing this. He is exactly what was promised. All right, so he's healing people, and it says all that were sick. So I imagine the way I read this, it says that he healed all that were sick. Everybody that was brought before him, those that were possessed, those that were ill, he healed them. He cured, he cast out devils, he did all these things. Jesus is also fully man, was he not? Can you imagine the stress, the being just tired, the exhaustion of this? I mean, yes, he's God, but he's also fully man. with all the same emotions, all the same feelings. He gets hungry, all of these things. Jesus is probably getting to, and this is all in a single day as far as we know. It says when the evening came. So this is on the evening of the day that he came down off the mountain. And all of the stuff that's going on. So in verse 18, it finishes up with our text this morning. It says, "Now when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave commandment to depart unto the other side." Jesus has probably done exactly what he needs to do here. They need to travel to the other side of the water where they're at. And he's going to continue his ministry. And we know, and I don't know if that's what we finish up next week. I didn't read ahead, but there's some more miracles that Jesus performs on the way and when they get there and so forth. I'm not going to go into that. So let me ask you this. We all know who and what Jesus is, right? I think everybody in this room knows who Jesus is. But why was it so important for Jesus to demonstrate the power that he has?
Actions speak louder than words.
Absolutely. You know, Jesus needed to make them understand that he was not just an ordinary man making a bunch of claims. They'd heard all that before. You know, they've had false prophets and false teachers since time began. You really need to do this. Well, if you do this, you can be just like God. Satan pulled that one on Adam and Eve, right? You can be just like God. All you need to do is this. If you know this, you'll be just like God. You'll be just as important as God. So from the time of mankind, we've heard all the claims. You know, I can do this, I'm that, and this and that. But Jesus' actions are what proved to these people, showed to these people, he can do these things. This man does have the power of God. He is God in the flesh. They needed to know that his word was true and absolute. He didn't claim anything that he couldn't back up. So all his little cliches I used at the beginning of this, Jesus is the exact opposite of that. He could do all of the things that he claimed. He could do all the things that he said he would do. The witnesses to his miracles, faith, increased exponentially every time Jesus performed one of these miracles. Now think about your own personal life, your own Christian walk. Every time you pray, you ask God for help, intercession, something, whatever it is, and you see that prayer answered, what does that do to your faith? So what Jesus started, what Jesus was doing then, is just as effective today as it was these couple thousand years ago. Every time you see a miracle, and I don't know how long some of you have been here. Years ago, we used to do this thing here at church where I would have people tell me throughout a month, I believe that every time Jesus answers a prayer, that's a miracle. And I would have people kind of keep track of how many answered prayers did you have this month? And we'd keep a number out there on a little certificate. This is how many miracles God performed just for the people here in this little church for the last month. And we kept track of that. It kept your mind kind of focused on answered prayers and things that the Lord had done for us. But those little things like that, help us to remember who Jesus is. When we see his works in addition to his words, does that not make your faith just increase every single time? And that's what Jesus was doing here. When we come to him, we can know that everything that we ask him is possible. We know it. And to approach him the same way the first two guys here did, that's a great example for us. I know he can do it, and that's the way I need to approach him. I know he can if it's his will. Now, I can't make him do it, and I can't say, God, it is your will to do this for me. That's not the way it works. But if I know these things, then I can put my faith in the words that he speaks, right? If I know that he can perform these miracles, and we have this record of him performing these miracles, and I know the miracles he's performed in my life, and you probably do too, then you can know that the words that he speaks, the promises that he makes, that's good as gold, you know. That's another cliche, I guess. You know, when we're in situations that seem helpless or hopeless to us, just think back on those situations that he's already changed. You know, that's one of the greatest things for us, I think, is, you know, there was a long spell that God didn't speak to his people, and then he did. But those people always remembered the things that God had done for their forefathers, or even done in their lives. And those are the kind of things that help us come to him the way we should, in humility and faith. All right, I'm done. I appreciate it, everybody. Hope you got something out of the lesson this morning.